Okay, just to recap, I basically just shared with the class that next Monday, which is what? April 25th. We're going to do a study review for the final exam. If you look in the course materials, you see a list of questions in there, 2 pages. Those are the questions that we're going to go over on Monday. Those are the questions you should be able to answer for the final exam. Between now and Monday, review that and be prepared to discuss that in class, either as all or in groups, not sure. Also, don't worry about the final question on there about power. And I would even say at this point, if there's a reading, if there's a chapter on it, I'll make that optional. I encourage you to read it. It's good because we all deal with these sorts of things. But if you're pressed just to prepare for the exam and you get your final project together, you don't have to make that option. All right, so giving you guys a little bit of slack here. Any comments or questions about any of that? All right, well, let's shift gears then and start to talk about the topic here of the class today, which is conflict management. Let's see, let me pull this thing back up here. All right, so who can tell us anything? What did they think was interesting or helpful about our discussion last week or last Monday, last session? What do you remember? What stood out? Maybe what questions you have? What's helpful? Maybe some of you have seen some of these things in action between now and then. Like you said, oh yeah, I was really avoiding and somebody else was really competitive, right? Maybe that kind of paradigm stuck in your mind.
The assessment helped me realize that I'm more avoiding than I realized.
Okay,
I think I knew that about myself, but not. I think I had 60% avoidance.
60?
Just sort of
Well, I
shocked.
beat you by 10, I'm 70. Yeah,
That's
Which
nice.
is not necessarily like bad, but it's just interesting to me because I didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah. You didn't know that, you didn't think you were an avoider?
I knew it was in there, but I didn't realize how much. So yeah.
You kind of knew it was there, but you were avoiding dealing with it.
Yeah.
Avoiding on the avoidance side. Okay, good. Was anybody else surprised when they took the assessment? Were they like, wow, I didn't think that or realize that?
I was actually higher percentage piece than I thought I would be.
Okay.
That was actually my top one, and I expected to be more of a avoid, but then when we looked at, I think, what was it, the 5 different ways that people
Mhm.
handle conflict, I actually found myself being like, I think I'm a mix of like everything except competition. Like,
Right.
so yeah, it was interesting to see that, and then with the score, I was like, okay, so maybe I'm not as much of an avoider as I thought I was.
Right. Yeah, and again, this isn't to paint you in a box or to say this is the only approach you'll ever take. You know, it's just sort of a preference or a tendency, right? So we're going to talk about when it might actually be good to change up your style from time to time. So you might be naturally competitive, but there may be occasions where avoiding is good, or you may be naturally an avoider, but there may be times when collaborating may be good. So we'll talk about sort of like situational conflict management style. Good. Any other thoughts on this topic before we review? Yeah, Tina.
I think the way I deal with conflict is also because depend on how much I close to that person. So like if I'm not really close, like if the conflict arises, that I want to avoid that or do something to get his peace. But if I really close, like my close friend, we discuss on some topic that we have different opinion, we will fight about.
Really?
So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's more for me to express
Yeah.
my opinion.
Now, why do you think that is? Why do you think you're free to express your opinion with a friend?
Maybe like I feel safe to talk with her, and like I feel okay to like she will not angry at me or something.
Okay.
Yeah, but with my boss or something at work,
Right.
maybe I will try to avoid.
Right, okay. Okay, so that's a good point there too. So a friend, think about our friends in terms of status. right? We're pretty much the same. So there's really not going to be any repercussions in terms of like getting in trouble or whatever by being open and, you know, having a little conflict with a friend. Then you start thinking about a boss, like, oh, I would disagree with a boss or a parent or something like that. If somebody has a higher status than me, then we may be more reticent to actually engage in something that we disagree with and we will avoid. Right? That's what a lot of us do. It's like, well, I don't want to get that person mad at me. I don't want to get fired, you know, whatever you think the ramifications of opening your mouth might be. So how we approach conflict can be situational in terms of the person with whom, you know, the other person can. That's good. And the level of trust there too. I think, you know, think about a friend. That's somebody we trust. And I can share something with them even if we disagree, and I know they're still going to be my friend at the end of the day, right? But if it's somebody you don't know as well, or somebody like a supervisor or something like that, you don't know if you can trust them. You don't know what the results might be, right? You might get hurt personally. You might get hurt, you know, in terms of your job, your stability there, whatever. So there's a lot of reasons why we all kind of rationalize. And, you know, we really don't think about this. It just all happens sort of intuitively. And we're like, I'm not going to go. So I think one of the, you know, the upsides of this whole thing, again, as students of leadership, is you want to think about it. You want to be aware of your conflict style so that you don't hinder the organization. You don't model something that's not healthy. And you can also see it in other people, right? So let's just say you're always an avoider, right? That's kind of your tendency. Well, what is that modeling for the people in your organization? Right? If you're the leader and you never deal with conflict, guess what? You're going to have a conflict-averse culture and nobody's ever going to deal with things. Everybody's going to suppress things or stuff things or just kind of talk about it back channels and backbite, those sort of things. Right? So you have to be aware of how your approach to conflict is going to set the tone for everybody else in your group. Right? As leaders, our behavior and attitudes and personality have broader consequences than just us, because we are role models and all those things. Okay, so again, this isn't just like a nice personal thing for you to know. This is something for you to be aware of as a leader, how your style impacts other people around you. And then, of course, identifying other people. So you might see somebody, you might be wanting to have a spirited exchange with people, you know, hey, bring up the heat, give me some other points of view, but one person in particular, for example, like never says it, right? There's somebody who's conflict averse, but you want to get that person involved. So you might kind of talk to that person afterward and say, hey, I want to know, how come you don't feel safe to share here? Or, you know, encourage that person to share to help them kind of grow and mature and be more of a contributor. All right, so let's just kind of quickly go through some of these things. Gave you a couple scenarios here, right? Sort of the unhealthy culture where the boss just sort of makes commandments, nobody says anything, versus the boss makes a commandment, but there's a culture where there can be some healthy conflict, or some healthy discussion which may lead to conflict. All right, the roots of conflict, when individuals disagree on an issue or a solution due to different goals, different perspectives, what's truly important, different personalities, different cultural norms, different views on team member roles. Of course, our pride and ego can be at play. Different types of conflict, interpersonal between us and another person, intergroup between group members, and then intergroup between different groups. All right, so then we talked about the different styles here, right? And I think this is when I had you guys take the assessment. I also talked about the fact that we don't want a situation where there is never any conflict. Because again, we might say, well, wasn't that a good thing? Right? We all hate conflict. Nobody likes conflict. Don't we want to avoid conflict? Well, it could be a sign that there's something unhealthy going on, right? So people are apathetic and they don't care enough, or they're intimidated, right? There could be a false harmony when people don't care enough, or they're afraid to express their feelings. Excessive suppression of different views can lead to groupthink. We talked about that. So again, nobody wants conflict, we want to avoid conflict, but if the culture doesn't let people express their ideas that may lead to conflict, you could have something unhealthy going on, under the surface. So as a leader, you want to be aware of this dynamic. So again, your job is not to stifle conflict, avoid it, but it's to mention that conflict creates. Don't stifle it, give people permission to be honest. Avoid sweeping issues under the rug, eventually someone's going to stumble over the bump. Avoid being the hero and solving people's problems. Reframe the conflict as a mutual problem to be resolved through cooperative effort and help members become collaborative. All right, so I think this is about where we took the assessment. And what this grid shows here is whether we have an internal focus or an external focus. So if we have and what's more important to us? So internal meaning our own thoughts and feelings, and external meaning other people's thoughts and feelings. So if we have a high preference for somebody else and low internal, we will tend to be accommodating, right? So if we're always thinking that this person's opinion and what they think is more important, that they have higher status than us, then we will accommodate them. Or smoothing over, like not dealing with it, right? Allowing other group to win, or other people in the group to win. On the other hand, if we have a high view of ourselves and a low view of somebody else, then we'll be dominating. And we work to dominate and control. So think about that. Whenever you're in a position where you're trying to win over, dominate, that's kind of what you think here. Again, it's not as human beings or, in the light of God. I mean, we're all equal, right? We all love each other. But in your particular role, in that particular relationship, that's how you may feel. You may feel you have a high view of yourself and a low view of the other person. So you're going to like steamroll over them or argue with them or whatever to win your way. Now, this suggests here is that avoiding comes from kind of a low view of yourself and a low view of others. How do you like that? Ignoring or steering clear of other groups. And then here, the high is problem solving or collaborating, working together to solve problems. I have a high view of my opinion, and I have a high view of your opinion. Therefore, I want to work together. I want to solve problems. I want to collaborate. Does that make sense? Right. So that's when to me, that's, really the most optimal and healthy perspective is like, hey, I think what I have to say is important. I'm not a doormat. I'm not a dummy. I've got something to say here. I've been around here a while now. I know a thing or two. And I also respect that you have something to say and that you're valuable and you know what you're talking about. Therefore, let's collaborate. Let's work together. So you don't put yourself in the position of like, oh, I'm just a doormat and you know everything, so I'll just do whatever y'all want. Or the other way, well, I'm Superman, I know everything, you don't know jack, so you better shut up and listen to me, right? Okay, so you kind of see how this works, right? The approach we take can depend upon our self-view and the view of other people. Now, it is possible to shift. Again, these assessments shows that we have preferences, and I think that's accurate. It's kind of like a personality thing, right? It's kind of an aspect of our personality. Fairly stable, but you can shift somewhat depending on the situation, right? Now, you're not always going to become one of these or the other, but you can use this. All right, so think about this. So when could you use a dominating approach, right? So you might think sometimes like, listen, I'm the boss here and I need to get my point across here, and it doesn't really matter what the other people think. Use this on important issues where you're certain that you're right and where the benefit of a resolution outweighs the possible negative feelings by the dominated group or person. Okay, so think about that. You can steamroll over somebody in a conflict because of your position, but get ready to peel a flat, sticky body off of the ground. How's that for an image, right? And breathe some life back into that person. especially if you're in a leadership position, if you steamroll over somebody and dominate them, they're like, oh, okay, right? We all kind of feel deflated and we feel like put in our place and like, we don't know if we should ever speak again. So use this one cautiously and use this when you're aware that there could be some personal ramifications, people could have feelings hurt. So again, if you use this one all the time, you're gonna have a room full of hurt pups all around. So use it sparingly when you know you're absolutely right, when you need a resolution quickly. You know, sometimes we use a dominating approach when like decisions need to be made really quick. So let's just say, let's think of a worship team example. So let's just say you show up to the service and you had your set list, and you were gonna play for 20 minutes, right? But then the pastor shows up or somebody shows up and says, hey, we only got 10 minutes today because we've got this special thing. We forgot we had a baby dedication, we forgot we had this other thing going on here, so we need you to cut it down. Now you might be saying, man, set's starting in 5 minutes, that's kind of short notice. I really won't have time to, you know, get the pulse of the team, so I'm just gonna make an executive decision, right? This is the executive decision approach. And you say, all right, gang, listen, we've got to make a call an audible here. We're gonna cut these 2 songs. Now, what if one of the songs you cut was like somebody who'd been practicing it for a month and she was all ready to sing, she was gonna do the lead on that song, and she did her hair and her makeup, and she bought a new dress because she knew she was gonna be on the platform singing a special song. What do you think might happen next?
Oh, man.
Huh?
I said, oh, man. I'd try to just make sure that that one gets done, I guess, if it was especially very highly anticipated.
Okay, so you wouldn't cut her song.
I would
For
try.
somebody, let's just say you had 4, let's just say you had 4 vocalists, and 2 of them weren't singing that morning.
Oh, man.
So sometimes you have to make a decision, right? You really didn't have time to collaborate and hear all their views, and they're gonna say, well, my song's harder, or I've been practicing longer. You just don't have time for that kind of collaboration. If it was like next week or something, then maybe you'd have some time for some back and forth.
Well, in worship ministry, like, people who are involved in worship ministry need to have the expectation that anything could change just in a second. Like,
It's like
and,
music.
yeah, and that's like, we have to be flexible because stuff like that does happen.
Yeah.
More often than we'd like for it to.
That's good, so part of the culture is expect changes, yeah.
At least here it is. I'm sure there's some other organizations and
I'm
churches
sure.
where that's not.
I'm sure other places it is. Okay, accommodating approach. All right, so when could or should you use this? In disputes that are of greater importance to the other group or person than they are to you. Okay, so let's just say you're having a disagreement with somebody and this person's like really passionate. And they're really like lobbying hard for their point of view, right? And you're thinking, dude, this isn't all that big of a deal to me, right? Okay, hey, you know what? You win, let's do it. Let's do it your way. Put that person in place. And you're like, I don't know what they're getting so upset about, I didn't really care. So if something is more important to the other person, excuse me, then by all means, you can accommodate. Okay, so you don't always have to collaborate or try to win. If you have this sense that this is really important to that person, it's not all that important. Not that you don't care, but you know, you could just kind of tell. Okay, problem solving. This is sort of that collaborative, work together kind of thing. Use this approach when you're willing to invest the time and effort to reach a resolution that maximizes everyone's outcome. Okay, so the operative word here is time and effort. If you've got time and you want to put in the work to listen to everybody's perspective and collaborate, because that's what it takes. Okay, it's not time wasted, but it is time. It's time consuming to get all the ideas on the floor, to listen to disagreements. But again, this can be your optimal, especially in complex situations. Not all of them are as easy as which song should we not play this morning. Some of them are like, where should we move to? Where should we move our new building? Who should we hire? You know, what's our strategy and our vision? Those things take time and effort to come up with resolutions that everybody's happy So again, you see that's a lot different than the previous situation, right? So you dominate when you gotta make you don't have much time and you know that your approach is right. You problem solve when you have plenty of time and you want to allow everybody to contribute. Okay, avoiding approach. You might be saying, is there ever a time to avoid conflict? This could be a good backup approach, and you could use it to buy more time. Because let's face it, sometimes, you're not quite prepared to, pick up arms. You need a little more ammunition, you need to think about it a little bit more. Let's just say you're at a meeting and, a couple different opinions pop up and you got your opinion, but you weren't really ready to deal with this situation. You can say, you know what, let's talk about this one next week. I'm gonna table this.
Yeah.
Or you could do the famous, well, hold on. Oh, mom? Oh, hold it, yeah, I'll be right there, hold on. I'm sorry, it's my mom, I gotta go. We'll pick this up next time. Or pretend your Apple Watch is dinging you. Oh, sorry, oh, look, my boss, I gotta go. All right, so whatever you gotta do, get out of the situation. But again, don't avoid it indefinitely, and this shouldn't be your preferred approach, is to always avoid. This is kind of like an escape valve for a moment, yes ma'am?
I've been in situations where I've confronted people and they didn't handle it very well because they weren't in a mentally stable place too.
Mhm.
So I used the avoiding approach at first, and then I proceeded to confront them
Okay.
after a long period of time, but it didn't
Okay.
go over well. So what would
It
you
didn't go over well.
suggest? No. What would you suggest for those people who are kind of more sensitive and just not, they take it personally and take it way too far?
Yeah. So that's a little different situation here. That's kind of more like a personnel issue, people that don't respond well to correction or criticism. As opposed to two people disagreeing over something. But to answer your question, what did you do? Did you try something else? I mean,
Whenever I confronted or?
yeah, did you learn from that and say, okay, next time I'm going to?
I mean, it needed to be said, I was kind of getting resentful, honestly, and I think
Yeah.
whenever you harbor too much emotion and feeling, it's gonna come out in other ways.
Yeah,
And then they're gonna ask you what's going on, so I just decided to take that approach,
yeah.
for better or for worse.
Well, I'm sure you've developed a relationship with that person, right? I mean, that helps. Sometimes people, they receive it better when they feel like they can trust us and all those sort of things. The only time they hear from us is when there's a problem or they do something wrong, then they might take it part. So, just kind of work on that side of it, sort of look at it sort of in terms of situational leadership. One of the skills they're low on is handling criticism. So you have to sort of be hands-on, high relationship, those sorts of things. Any other ideas? What do you guys think?
I actually used the backup approach and use it to buy more time,
Yeah.
especially when I was at Gateway working on Men's Summit, because we work with a lot of viewers and people like that, so we're trying to come to terms on agreements, and this person's gonna be here, this person's gonna be here, the times, schedules, things like that.
Yeah.
And when there's a question asked that especially when you're talking on behalf of an organization or on behalf of another team, and you don't really have the answer, it's a really great approach, just to pull out the old, hey, let me get back to my team on that.
Yeah.
Get right back to you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Could it be, could you bring someone else into it at that point? I feel like it reminds me of the scripture that's talking about when you, I don't know if that's specifically, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's specifically about confrontation or not.
Like if your brother's caught in a sin,
Yeah,
bring in somebody else.
yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily this person was in sin, right? They just sort of needed a correction kind of thing.
I guess that helps me in situations like that, because then it's not just them against you, it's
Or maybe find somebody else that might be able to break it to them, like maybe somebody they work with or trust and say, hey, not to avoid your duty, but you have to find a way to communicate that's in a way that's acceptable. And if you've tried whatever you can, kid gloves, take you out to lunch or coffee, and then all else fails, then you kind of got an issue here. Now you've got a personnel issue. They're not able to do their job because they can't grow and learn and receive feedback. You know, so at a certain point, as a leader, you have a responsibility to make a decision about whether that person is capable of doing their work, right? So, and in churches, this is challenging because let's face it, you know, we deal with a lot of volunteers. We ain't firing nobody, you know, people are there out of the goodness of their heart. And some people are hard to talk to, right? And we may not feel comfortable, like, you know, maybe it's an older person, right? You're a younger person, it's like a really good correction to somebody my mom's age or something like that, right? And it gets a little awkward and weird. No easy answer. All right, compromising, good backup approach to use when others fail to resolve issues. Sometimes you just have to kind of give in. All right, so I'll give you Monday and Tuesday, you give me Wednesday and Thursday. All right, cooperative problem solving. Let's talk about cooperative problem solving here. There's a good scripture on this one, Philippians 2:4. You guys probably know this one. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Conflict resolution process must become a cooperative problem-solving process in which the conflict is a mutual problem to be resolved cooperatively. Competition can cause a struggle in which both parties lose. Attempting to win the battle may cause you to lose the war. This is important too, especially for those of you that like to compete, you like to be right. You can be right and you could win that battle, but you may have set, you know, you may have set back your relationship or some other things in doing so. Okay, so that this little phrase here, you probably heard of that: win the battle and lose the war. That's really appropriate when it comes to conflict. All right, so let me give you some specific ideas here. Identify common ground and interests. Okay, so what's important to you here? What's important to you here? Let's just talk about, can we agree on things that are important to us? Where there's disagreement, sticks to issues and not personal attacks. And again, we always tend to assume people's motives or think that they're just being difficult because they're a difficult person, or so you have to, especially if you're leading a group and there's conflict going on, you have to tell your people, look, let's keep this on the issues, not on the personalities. Seek to understand the other's view from his or her perspective. What are their assumptions? What do they believe that's not being said? Okay, so again, people argue and take positions on things because they have some certain beliefs underneath that maybe aren't being articulated. So you try to have to understand why is this person so agitated here? Why are they so adamant? What is so important here that they're willing to, you know, have a conflict over? Acknowledge the value of the other's point of view, even if you disagree with them. Okay, now politicians are really good at this one, some politicians. My opponent makes a really good point here, but let me tell you why he's completely wrong. You know, so you affirm that person and let them know that they were heard, right? And they're not stupid and what they said wasn't idiotic, but you know, you've got a different point of view. So let them share and acknowledge that what they said that's not a bad idea. You know, I could see why you would hold that opinion, but let me tell you why I think this is a better idea. Disagree with the other's idea while confirming his or her personal confidence. And again, sometimes people have a hard time separating their ideas from their identity, right? And if they shared it, this is like part of who they are, especially if it's like personal or whatever. So if you can help separate the idea from who the person is, so that if you're disagreeing with their idea, you're not like dismissing them or insinuating that they're not competent, right? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what drives a lot of people, right? Is they have to win because they don't want to feel like they're insignificant or that I'm not a good person. They can't separate their ideas. So if you can affirm them as a person while disagreeing or taking issue with their idea, you go a long way to taking sting out of it, so to speak, right? Like they're not putting me down, they're just saying that what I said right here is right. And again, this is a mature thing to do too. If you're in a conflictual situation, you have to remember, we're disagreeing over ideas and things that you know, want to do, or positions or whatever, goals, not you personally. You know, just assume that you're valued and part of the team. That's a given. People aren't trying to get you off the team necessarily. They're just saying what you share here is, you know, somebody else is going to take issue with it. Because once we start to identify our ideas with ourselves, that's when we can like begin to check out and avoid and all those kinds of things, right? If you've ever been in a meeting and you shared somebody and then somebody would just like shoot that thing down like one of those bug zappers you see on TV. You're like, whoa. And it wasn't just your idea, and you just didn't objectively say, oh, okay, well, I guess that wasn't a very good idea. I better think of better ideas. It's like you got shot to the ground. You were zapped. You were mortified. Okay, so part of being mature says, okay, I can say something, and if somebody doesn't like it, that doesn't mean I'm a horrible person or I have no value in this team, right? We have to adopt that position. And this isn't easy. Listen, I'm almost 60 and I still kind of wrestle with this stuff, right? If I throw out an idea and somebody shoots it down, I'm like, I guess I have to go home and eat worms and die, you know? I have no value around here whatsoever. You know, I mean, deep inside each of us is a fragile little ego, right? So we have to put on our big boy pants and say, okay, they didn't hate me, they're not hating me, they're not shooting me down, they just didn't like that idea. They're gonna take issue with my idea. And maybe next time, I better do my homework better before I throw an idea out on the table. Because I know that person's gonna be there, and they're smart, and they do their homework. And if I don't do my homework, they're gonna slice it up. Like those Ginsu knives you see on TV. Have you ever been in a meeting with somebody and they've done their homework and like almost everything they say, they can back up with like 3 reasons why and research and evidence and like, oh my God, they must have stayed up all night preparing for this. And you're thinking you just kind of winged it, you know, like on your way into the meeting, you know. You didn't stand a chance against that, brother. I used to work with a guy like that. But people like that get ahead. Do your homework. Because people realize that. The leaders see you and say, okay, that person really understood what they were talking about. Emphasize the positive in the other. Limit and control expressions of negative feelings. This is tough, right? Because sometimes we get in conflict and all of a sudden our hot buttons are pushed, and you know what I mean? Triggers are going off and mother wounds are being opened. And it's just all, it gets all weird, right? All of a sudden just the skies opened up and poured a big old bucket of hurt on us, right? So we get hurt. So we have to sort of keep that in control and not lash out and pout or clam up. If the other person harms you, be willing to forgive. Seek reconciliation rather than nursing regret, right? This is Christian, right? This is what Jesus said. Give your brother and sister your else heavenly Father will forgive you. When you get in a conflict, you have to be able to, maybe not at that moment, but afterwards, you gotta say, okay, that person is not very nice to me, but I'm gonna do the right thing here. I'm gonna do the Christian thing. Hold on one second, I just got a notification here. Does anybody have a Mac charger by any chance?
Yeah.
Do you?
We have
With the newer?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes this thing works fine for 3 hours and then sometimes it doesn't last for an hour.
Would you like my card?
Yeah.
They
car would
come with the.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you. Give me 1 second. Okay, so know your own hot buttons, All right, so I just sort of mentioned that. Now, what are hot buttons? You guys know what that is?
Like triggers.
Yeah, like triggers. It's kind of like a pop psychology term, but it basically means like the things that people can do that get you mad, and you know they get you mad, right? So again, part of the maturing says, I know what my hot buttons are, or knowing who your hot button people are, right? There's just some people, man, when they come into the room, you're like, okay, get prepared to get mad. That person's gonna say something or do something, it's gonna trigger me. So if you're gonna be in a meeting with that person and you know that like chances are they're gonna say something and at some point you're gonna lose it, right? Just be prepared for that. Mentally, give yourself a little pep talk and say, I will not lash out at that person. Know what kinds of issues. Solicit the other's views, listen responsively, share information, nod your heads. What do you think? And again, it's challenging when somebody shares, it's like you're not really listening, you're just sort of like thinking about what you're gonna say, right? So bracket that little internal, jump ahead mode and say, okay, I'm just gonna shut up, I'm gonna listen to this person, because who knows, they might actually say something you agree with. Be appropriately honest, but take into account the consequences of what you say. Okay, so this is sort of like that dominating approach. You can dominate as a leader since you're prerogative, but there may be consequences. You can be honest and say, well, let me tell you what I really think here. And you just let it fly. And then like, man, it comes back to haunt you for weeks, right? What you said, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. Now, you guys are all quite young, probably. Anybody married in this? Okay. All right. Biggest mistake I've ever made with my wife was saying something I thought was completely true and honest, but not really thinking about how it was going to impact her. I regretted that for weeks. You know what I mean? So sometimes you gotta like take one for the team and say, I'm not going to be honest here. I'm not going to say what I really feel and think here because it could really offend somebody or hurt somebody. So you got to really take stock of that, right? Having an open dialogue, which could lead to conflict, is one thing, but saying things that could, hurt, damage a relationship, hurt another person, that's another thing. Okay, so please don't misunderstand what I'm talking about, conflict management, as saying whatever you want, however you want. You know what I'm saying? We all have to be wise and mature in how we do that and understand the consequences. The results. All right. Boy, you're saying that's a lot of work, Dr. Markow. But if you make yourself go through a healthy conflict resolution process, you'll develop an open and honest culture where people and their opinions are valued. And even when we don't win, we all want to be heard. So again, not everybody's going to get their way all the time in every situation. People just want to be heard. And if they know this is a safe place for them to share, they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. You'll gain the benefits of many points of view. With openness comes creativity, and an open culture is more likely to bring out the best in everyone. And you'll prevent the stuff and bury it pattern of hurt feelings and frustrations that many people in churches have that cause them to leave wounded. Oh man. How many people are lurking around churches with some kind of hurt feeling or some kind of grudge against somebody or against the pastor or whatever? They've never been able to bring it out in the open, never deal with it. They kind of stuffed it and buried it, swept it under the rug. And again, I think like Rachel said, when we do that, we're frustrated, it comes out in other ways, right? So you've got that burr under your saddle and it's not going away, it's there. And if you don't deal with it, it's gonna manifest itself maybe like you're gonna transfer some of your feelings to other people or to that person in another way. You get angry at them for reasons that don't really make sense. Let's face it, this is the stuff of like church splits and all that. When people have conflicts and they're not free to disagree, they can't bring them up in a healthy manner. They don't get their opinions heard. And we have this weird culture in a lot of churches that says it's not okay to share things that disagree with people. So you got a lot of Christians that kind of living in churches and they're unhappy, they don't share with anybody. And then like after a year of this, they're like, you know what, let's go somewhere else. I wanna go somewhere else. We don't like it here anymore. Yeah, we don't get fed here anymore. So people kind of have this rationale why they should leave. God told us to leave. And the real root of the issue was they had some kind of conflict or issue with another person and they weren't able to air it. And heck, I think we'd have a lot of nations in this world. A lot of Christians just developed a little bit of backbone and we learned how to talk about things we disagree with. A little more healthy and open. That's just my opinion. I cannot verify the test and we would have fewer denominations. This is what I think.
But it makes sense.
It does make sense, right? It's a measured opinion. It's a reasonable opinion. Okay, now I want to do a little case study here, all right? So I'm gonna let you guys do this in small groups just for fun. Let you talk a little more than me. Who'd like to read this case study here? Tim, you're right up front. You look like you got your eyes glued on it.
Kathy Contentious that's her name, has recently joined the youth group leadership team. She's very enthusiastic about being a part. She is also very argumentative and seems intent on debating every issue that other team members bring up. One day, Adam avoided her and her clash over where to hold their next social event. There is thick tension in the room. Kathy's frustrated and Adam is ready to leave the room. You are the leader and everyone turns to you for a solution.
All right, so what is going on in this scenario? How do we see different conflict styles in conflict with one another? What practical steps would you take in this situation to bring about the norms of cooperation? Okay, so this covers several areas that we talked about in this lecture here. All right, so turn to your table partner, take about 10 minutes, we'll come back, debrief, and
We're all restrained.
I know, right?
You want to do the whole thing? What is going on?
Oh, let's see, Judith.
Yeah, I was calling my table partner.
Oh, we can hear her phone. Can you bring her in, Kim? All right, Kim's gonna bring you to her group.
Thank you.
We just have the whole school. If this was me, I would first of all just be like, both of my shut up, not children. Oh. Yes.
There was a thing that
American
happened.
Runner, aren't you?
Are you American Runner?
I'm like half and half, peaceful and confronting. So I think it's because like I think
Oh, okay, thank you, I see.
make peace and also shut up and sit down now. I'm tired of it.
Yourself.
American Runner, like,
Yeah.
blunt and aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's just our instinct, is that right? We're just like,
Yeah.
doesn't shut
Okay, what's going on? The problem is that Kathy is doing as much and Adam is.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I guess it'd be a good thing to separate, not separate, but like first be like, okay, Kathy, what do you want?
I disagree, we.
What is it that you want? Okay.
Yeah.
And then
No, but like.
from there, like just
Yeah.
try to see if you can incorporate
I
other
would be
members.
like, I don't
So
care.
you'd be like, okay, guys, what do we think? And then as a leader,
So it's kind of like.
Okay,
like how others talk about this.
we're doing this.
Okay, wait, yeah.
So
We could like acknowledge each of their conflict styles, you know?
Oh,
Because you're having trouble understanding each other and they're both getting frustrated with the same issues. So if we say, hey, how do you think you deal with this? And they can be like, oh,
Yeah.
like this is why I'm doing this, you know, like for Kathy.
Oh, like have them like acknowledge.
Yeah, like say it out loud. And she can like clearly understand.
I would also think she's very, she's also very she just saying that to cause an argument, or is she just saying that What are certain reasons you don't use that?
It's weird though, the way careful with that. Because you can easily get, like RTC, whenever you call that out
Which probably
so how would y'all do that in a way?
I think you could do like get the one song, maybe pull them together. And then pull Adam alone. Because it'll probably come after.
Yeah, you're right, because like the leaders can hear their person coming into it, so maybe they need to meet each person separately to hear both of them and then kind of facilitate the conversation together, kind of like a counselor would do in a way.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing from you, because it's probably just a misunderstanding, most likely, although Kathy is pretty.
Yes. And then if it seems like, like they can come to a consensus and like agree, then have them bring them back together and like watch them and like see if they can come to this. But if it still seems like Kathy isn't doing it, I feel like that's when you have to be like coordinated and just be like, okay, we're doing this, whatever it is, you're the leader.
Do you see what steps? I want us to look at the okay, let's set it up to the way like common ground. And then acknowledge the value of so it's about like trying to get them to be respectful to one another.
I think Judith wanted to add something to it.
Okay, Judith, thank you.
Oh, okay. When I was saying, keeping in mind that Markow was saying about trying to stick to the issue and not the personal conflict of personalities between Kathy and Adam. So I would, I'm not sure if you already said this, I didn't already hear, but I would focus on the logistics of the social events and try to get ideas from Kathy as what would her class work. And then from Adam as well, see from those two ideas, what works best for your education, what did both
I think so.
Yeah.
When I read that way,
it's like
Locations.
if you even say anything, you're just gonna like.
When you do that, you could also probably find like common ground too. Like if they actually agree about anything.
Especially if, you know, they're both.
Yeah.
If they disagree.
Because to discuss the actual issues.
I think to get to the logistics, you will kind of have to touch on the personalities just a little bit to kind of bring peace to the room. Kathy is enthusiastic, but she's new. And she's a new person coming in being very argumentative. And she's a new person coming in being very debating. And people have been there for a while based on what they said she recently joined. So I think Chris probably said, he said it already, like, Kathy, I love your enthusiasm, but let's not be argumentative about it. Let's just calm down for a minute, hear what everybody has to say, and then kind of go from there.
Which is like a certain one.
They're not attacking each other.
Sometimes they're like more dominating,
Like you.
And if Kathy does like someone
Probably the most important thing would be to like just affirm both of them, that like, hey, I hear you, your ideas are good, they just might not be what the situation needs right now.
That would probably address I'm being called out, and so I would say, you know, hey, I think I like what you're saying, but I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, that may be better.
And then probably cut the meeting short, because then it can divide the group, where the group is choosing sides, like, oh yeah, she's right, oh no, she's right, and just cause chaos, so maybe get really quick, main points, yada.
You could, what is it? What is like, you kind of like, be like, okay, well, we're gonna take up this next week. What is that called?
Oh, the avoidance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like kind of like you were saying, just be like, okay,
Yeah.
hit this up next week, and then afterwards be like, hey guys, it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, I think.
Okay, so acknowledge the different conflict styles. Get them to clearly communicate their issues that they're having.
I was thinking that.
But focus on the actual issue and find out what idea is best and find common ground. Affirm Kathy's enthusiasm, but allow space for other opinions to be heard. And if it's still bad, then be avoided. And then address them after the meeting with
I would even
individually.
say don't make a decision that's, and that decision is gonna be based on legal issues or emotions. Because you yourself can decide because you know what's wrong.
Or like,
I think we, okay.
Yeah.
Don't decision.
Yeah, just.
Personally, you want to be able to evaluate and know exactly what's happening and not anything misconstrued.
Yeah, okay. So don't make a decision at meeting.
Goes them individually.
Did you have any other changes?
Here, like validating them
Um,
individually.
And as I said, they're like.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Provide that.
Thank you for coming.
I'm
Yeah.
to try to calm the situation, calm them down. And then after that, just to stick with
Very, that was, I don't know, you know what I'm saying, yes. Very research.
on the emotional side of it, we may also lose time on trying to come up with how we're gonna do the social event.
I've always liked trying.
This person.
Can you say one more time? So everybody can.
I believe that those are good ideas to try
I'm
and
trying not to.
and add on and have, those personal meetings with them. But have
Yeah,
a cap on the
And
amount
then-
of time to be dedicated on focusing on their emotional needs. And then there's also that we need to take care of the social event culture.
All right, let's take one more minute and bring it on down.
Yeah.
Share the class.
Good job. Basically just making sure you don't spend too much time on them individually, because then your brain's gonna be going towards the event.
Then they wouldn't just be allowed.
Do you want it or do you want it?
I don't like to eat it when no one else is. And I just feel awkward. And so being in the class. I don't expect more people to get this class.
All right, well, who would like to go first? Okay, who would like to go second? We'll just skip the first.
Yeah, we'll go first.
Okay, all right. Molly and Nicole.
Yeah. So we talked about how the conflict styles of both of these people are like, they're kind of, I don't know how to use my words, like, they're not working together well, so basically like they're the extremes of the other person. So the avoidance person will probably get really triggered by the argumentative person, but then the argumentative person will probably be so frustrated, Kathy's frustrated by the avoidance person because what they want is the exact opposite of what the other person's giving to them. So we're talking about how they're probably in the moment, if this conflict is happening, they're probably just not in a great place to actually deal with it there. So we talked about, do you want to explain that?
Yeah, we talked about like what the leader could do, like the practical steps is to just kind of be like, let's table
this discussion for now, because obviously it's not getting anywhere and like the emotions are just continuing to get more heightened. And all that's gonna do is just create more tension and create more like discomfort and conflict. So the leader could say, let's table this, we'll take like a breather and revisit it tomorrow or in a little bit.
So kind of using the avoider
Yeah,
technique himself to
Yeah.
take the steam out of it. Okay, good, I like that.
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And then just revisit it when both parties are kind of calmed down and when they can both speak, like have their voice be heard equally in like a different setting, because obviously where they're doing right now is not.
Okay. Okay, good.
And then we talked about maybe you could go to them both individually and validate what they're wanting to say, because they're probably not hearing each other and neither person's being validated. So then we decided that ultimately if they weren't able to come to a conclusion, you'd probably have to be like the dominating person and choose one of their ideas if they're not able to work it out. But then at least if you've talked to them and validated their perspectives, they wouldn't feel totally shut down and like they're
Right.
safe to share.
Okay, good. All right, good ideas. What else? Who else? How about the back row there? Stacy, you're right in the middle, so.
We said to focus on the actual issue
Okay.
rather than so much on the individuals until
Good.
after the
I
meeting.
like
Maybe
that,
you
stick
can
on the issues.
pull aside like the individual after the meeting and be like, you know, I hope you like affirm Kathy's enthusiasm, but also like we have to hear other opinions, but that would be like outside of the meeting, so it's not like dramatic and just escalates.
Yeah, because that could get kind of awkward in the meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good, yeah.
And then, so yeah, focus on the actual issue, and we said don't make a decision that meeting, like y'all said, and kind of just like let it fade away and then just leave and, you know, come to a conclusion at a different time when there's not so much emotions involved.
All right, good. Let's see, how about Tim and Tirza?
So the first one that I wrote down is you could collaborate to discover what both parties want in an event location, since that's
Okay.
what the discussion is over.
So kind of finding common ground.
Finding common ground
Okay, so
on-
what do we both
What do we
want?
both
What do we agree with?
value
Okay, good.
in a location, and then decide on potential location based on those.
Okay, so identifying have them identify their common ground. Okay, good. Is that it?
I also said the table the issue.
Okay, so you all kind of said table this, huh? Interesting. All right. Okay, Mariana and Tian?
Well, I was implied there's more people there,
Yeah,
so also including them, not the discussion, but the opinions about it. Because sometimes like 1 versus 1 is hard to figure out who's right or who could be like the winning side.
I'm sorry. Are you suggesting to ask somebody else in the room other than those two?
Yeah,
Okay, okay. got it.
yeah, like you involve the rest of the people
Involve the
around
rest of the
there
people, okay, good.
on their opinion or another idea or something.
Okay,
But
kind of take the focus off of these two people.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
What else other than what they say?
We just want to encourage the one that avoidance to speak up more.
Okay,
And when she said about asking other people to speak up, so helping the lady Katie to listen to other people more than just keeping talking.
Okay.
Extra.
so would you do that there in the meeting, or would that be kind of like a behind the scenes thing you would do like later?
In the meeting.
You would do it right there in the meeting?
I mean, like, no, not me talk to her about stuff, but when we ask others to speak up, we help her to listen.
You what?
Help her, the lady, the competitive girl, to listen to other people as well.
Okay, okay, good, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes it is okay to do that. You know, sometimes people are aware that they could be a little domineering or whatever. You don't want to say that, like, you know, Kathy, you're always dominating conversation. You just shut up for a minute. You want to be like that. But chances are, this is something she's been dealing with her whole life, right? She knows she's a bit argumentative. So and it's appropriate to say, Kathy, we heard you, good ideas. Let's let Adam share, right? So you sort of referee a little bit because you know she'll talk all day and you know he'll never talk unless you kind of bring it out of him. So be a little referee and just kind of ask them, great ideas, we like that. Adam, just go ahead and share what you're thinking here. And then he will feel the liberty because you as the leader have called on him and given him permission, right? So now he's not just going to up to bat against her on his own volition, but now you're supporting him, you've got his back, so to speak. Okay, good. Now let's kind of flip this scenario here a little bit. What if you have two people that are both like Kathy contentious, like Kathy contentious and Carl contentious?
Oh my gosh.
You hand them both a weapon and.
Oh, yes. I hate situations like that. I get like secondhand embarrassment for them.
Yeah. I know, right? That is kind of awkward. When arguments break out there.
Can't stand it.
So it's like a problem solving approach works in that situation where you have two people like jury votes.
Yeah, that's what we did in school.
Theoretically, yes. Practically, it's challenging, And again, these might have to be sidebar issues with people. Or again, if you feel, it depends on the level of trust between you and them and how tight the group is, right? So if there's high group cohesion, these people know each other pretty well, chances are their personality tendency to do that is going to be it's going to be on the table. It's not going to be an elephant in the room. And again, this is why you want to build up that trust and cohesion and get those elephants, point to the elephants in the room. So you can say things like, oh, here go Kathy and Carl again, right? They're both going to, here, you guys want a couple of swords? Why don't you just take care of it that way, right? Ha, ha, ha. So you sort of take the heat out of it by acknowledging the fact that we all know that you folks tend to be a little, right? And again, this is a mature, high trust team groups. You can't just do this right off the bat if you don't know them, if they don't know each other, because then they kind of feel insulted. So again, you want to get to that point where you develop this healthy culture where people understand their personalities, how it impacts others, their strengths, their weaknesses, those sorts of things. So this kind of scenario here was just sort of like, plopped out from outer space. But in real life, that's kind of part of a group dynamic, right? You kind of know these people, they know each other, there's some history, you have some trust and capital with them to talk to them and work with them. That's where you want to be, right? You don't want to be like blind in a situation like this. You want to develop camaraderie and cohesion so that you can more positively deal with these things. Okay, any other thoughts on this topic here? Was this helpful at all? Interesting? Okay, good. Again, it's not something we love to deal with, but having a few ideas in your arsenal, maybe next time you have to deal with something will help you. That's my hope. So, what are we doing on Monday? Huh? Exam review. What did I ask you to do before Monday? Go over the study guide, okay, write down any questions, anything that you have that's not clear. So I'm not sure whether we'll go through it together in a group. I might have you break up and take different questions. So be prepared to, to go anywhere on Monday. All right. And then Wednesday, what are we doing on Wednesday? Presentation. Now Monday, what I'll do is ask for how many groups we have. So I'll figure out who's in groups. We'll divide the number of groups, and that'll give us a better time frame. I'll be able to say, okay, based on how many groups we have, we've got 75 minutes here, so you all got 10 minutes each, something like that. Or we have more individuals, so you've got like 6 minutes each, right? We'll figure that out on Monday as well, in case you're wondering how long the presentation has to be. Any other questions about anything else we've talked about? Housekeeping, content? All right, well, God bless you guys. Have a great weekend. See you next week.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, bye, Judith. God bless you.
God bless you. Bye.
Bye.
I had that this morning, and David's not here, and